There was a time when a bucket of white liquid could quietly protect an entire home. No machines, no chemicals with warning labels, no sealed environments. Just a simple mixture brushed onto walls that somehow managed to fight moisture, slow decay, reflect heat, and even discourage pests. Today, that same problem damp walls, mold growth, trapped humidity has turned into a constant cycle of repairs, repainting, and expensive solutions. But older homes had a different answer, and it didn't look like technology at all. Walk into a modern house with moisture problems, and the response is almost automatic. Dehumidifiers start running, anti-mold paints are applied, sealants are layered over walls. Sometimes entire sections are torn out and replaced. And still, in many cases, the problem comes back because the focus is often on blocking moisture instead of understanding how it moves. That's where the older method becomes interesting. It didn't try to trap moisture. It worked by letting walls breathe. Long before modern paints and synthetic coatings, many households relied on something known as lime wash. It was common in rural homes, coastal regions, humid climates, and even large estates. Walls were coated in it regularly, sometimes once a year, sometimes less often, depending on the environment. It wasn't seen as a luxury or a specialized treatment. It was basic maintenance, like sweeping a floor or repairing a roof. What makes lime wash easy to overlook is how simple it appears. At its core, it is made from lime and water, sometimes with natural additives depending on the region. It goes on as a thin, chalky coating that dries into a soft, matte surface. It doesn't form a hard, plastic-like layer the way modern paints do. And that difference is exactly why it worked. Because the real secret was not in covering the wall. It was in how the wall continued to interact with the air after being coated. To understand that, you have to look at what moisture actually does inside a building. Moisture doesn't just sit on surfaces. It moves. It travels through air, through materials, through tiny pores you can't see. When warm air hits a cooler surface, condensation forms. When water gets trapped inside a sealed wall, it creates the perfect environment for mold and decay. Modern materials often try to stop this by sealing everything tightly. But when even a small amount of moisture gets inside, it has nowhere to go. Lime wash took a different approach. It allowed moisture to enter and leave naturally. The surface remained porous, meaning water vapor could pass through instead of being trapped. This reduced the conditions that mold needs to grow. And because lime itself is naturally alkaline, it created an environment that many microorganisms struggle to thrive in. That combination, breathability and alkalinity, was quietly doing a lot of work. In older homes made from stone, brick, or earth-based materials, this mattered even more. These structures naturally absorbed and released moisture depending on the weather. A sealed coating would disrupt that balance. Lime wash, on the other hand, worked with it. It became part of the system rather than a barrier against it. This is why you often see whitewashed walls in hot regions. It wasn't only for appearance. The light color reflected sunlight, reducing heat absorption. At the same time, the breathable surface allowed moisture to evaporate, which helped cool the structure slightly. It wasn't air conditioning, but it was a form of passive climate control that required no electricity. And yet, this method slowly faded from everyday use. Not because it stopped working, but because modern materials offered something people began to prefer: speed and durability without maintenance. Synthetic paints last longer without needing to be reapplied. They provide uniform color and resist wear in a different way, but they also changed how walls behave. When homes shifted towards sealed surfaces, insulation layers, and synthetic finishes, the natural movement of moisture became less visible, but not less important. The problems didn't disappear. They just showed up differently. Instead of gradual wear, you get sudden mold outbreaks, peeling paint, or trapped dampness that takes longer to notice and more effort to fix. This is where the old method offers a useful lesson. The goal was never to create a perfect barrier. The goal was to manage the environment inside the wall, to allow small changes to happen continuously instead of letting them build into bigger problems. That idea can still be applied today, even if you don't live in a traditional stone house. In modern homes, one of the biggest issues is moisture getting trapped behind non-breathable layers. Bathrooms, kitchens, and poorly ventilated rooms are especially vulnerable. You might not be able to replace your walls with natural materials, but you can still think in terms of airflow, breathability, and surface behavior. For example, in areas where moisture is unavoidable, choosing finishes that allow some level of vapor movement can make a difference. Not all paints behave the same way. Some are designed to be more breathable than others. Understanding that difference can help reduce long-term issues. Another simple takeaway is ventilation. Older homes relied heavily on airflow windows, vents, and natural drafts. Lime wash worked best in combination with that movement. Without airflow, even breathable materials have limits. This is one of the mistakes people make when trying to recreate old methods in modern sealed spaces. The material alone is not the system. There is also a maintenance mindset that has largely disappeared. Lime wash was not applied once and forgotten. It was refreshed periodically. That might sound like a disadvantage, but it also meant problems were addressed early. Small cracks, minor dampness, surface wear, all of it was noticed and corrected before becoming serious damage. But this is not magic, and it is not a universal replacement for modern solutions. Lime wash works best on certain types of surfaces, particularly mineral-based materials like stone, brick, and plaster. It does not behave the same way on synthetic or heavily sealed surfaces. Applying it in the wrong context can lead to poor adhesion or uneven results. It also requires proper preparation and understanding of the surface underneath. And while its alkalinity can discourage some forms of microbial growth, it is not a cure for severe mold infestations. If a wall is already heavily contaminated or structurally compromised, professional assessment is necessary. The old method was part of a broader system of building design, not a standalone fix for every situation. There are also practical considerations. Lime wash can rub off more easily than modern paints, especially in high contact areas. It develops a patina over time, which some people appreciate and others do not. It is not designed for glossy, uniform finishes. Its strength is in function, not perfection. So why does it still matter? Because it reveals a different way of thinking about problems we still deal with today. Instead of sealing everything and reacting when something goes wrong, older methods focused on balance, on allowing materials to do what they naturally do, while guiding that process in a useful direction. The real lesson is not that everyone should start coating their walls in lime wash. It is that many modern problems come from interrupting natural systems without fully replacing their function. When moisture is trapped instead of managed, when airflow is reduced, instead of redirected, when surfaces are sealed without considering what happens underneath. That is when issues begin to build. And sometimes, the simplest materials remind us of that more clearly than the most advanced products. A wall covered in lime wash doesn't look like a solution to anything complex, but beneath that surface, it is quietly balancing moisture, reflecting heat, and creating conditions that resist decay. Not perfectly, not permanently, but consistently. That kind of solution doesn't disappear because it failed. It disappears because it doesn't fit into a world that prefers instant, long-lasting, maintenance-free answers. But homes are not static objects. They change with the environment around them, and methods that acknowledge that change often age better than those that try to eliminate it completely. If this kind of forgotten practical knowledge matters to you, subscribe to Forbidden Vaults, because the next vault opens another method modern life almost made us forget.